Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Sports Speak. Hope you're doing well. I'm Eddie Kalegi.
And I'm Tim Moore.
That is Tim Moore of the Tim Moore Experience. We will talk about that in just a moment. Rahill Jaiswal is joining us as well. Lots to break down today. We're going to start with the NBA. We're going to split this one for the Spotify listeners into two episodes. We'll start with the NBA. The trade deadline just happened. One of the craziest in league history. The Nets break things up. The Lakers make some big moves. The Knicks bring in Josh Hart. Lots to talk about. We'll break it down. Also talk about LeBron James setting the scoring record. And then at the end, go Birds, fly Eagles, fly. The Eagles playing in the Super Bowl this Sunday against the Kansas City Chiefs. We will preview Super Bowl 57. But I was planning to start with the Nets, and then I got home 2 nights ago, and I see on Twitter a tweet from NJCU tagging the ESPN assignment desk. And then I listened to the voice, and guess who it is?
Swung around, jump shot, good! Savoy, touched at the line, and NJCU has it! The fact that you have that saved concerns me.
I got it right.
It's your celebrity
famous,
now.
Tim.
You have to save it.
That was not saved. I just pulled it up off of Twitter. I had it ready.
I was expecting a lot worse feedback than what it's gotten, to be honest with you. I hated it initially. I was actually texting my mom in between because I'm like, I have to go home. I have to get a COVID test because I was not feeling good throughout like the start of the broadcast. Obviously, you can tell by my voice. You know how I talk regularly. Granted, I have a deep, raspy voice, but I genuinely don't typically sound like Mickey Mouse. But goodness, I'll put it like this: that game ending, probably the best ending to a game I've seen since a different game that actually I believe still sits top 10 all time of the ESPN highlights. There was a game against New Rochelle High School in Mount Vernon. God, I don't remember what year, but it was over 10 years ago, where there was a buzzer beater for New Rochelle in the closing seconds in White Plains. And it was just a beauty at County Center, hucked it full court, banked it in, and the whole crowd went nuts. You couldn't see a single person sitting in that arena. It was crazy. And that to me was considered like the craziest ending, but I think this topped it. And to be honest with you, the only thing I'm truly disappointed about is, everyone's talking about me or everyone's talking about the shot. Nobody's talking about the kid that made the shot. And that's what I think. This is the only thing that maybe upsets me a little bit because, and I think you got to see the post, Eddie. I don't know if Rahill got to see it, but I pointed out the biggest thing, which I really think what led to that call, to be truly honest, was that in a minute and a half, Jason Battle comes up the floor looking for help from the right wing, has to cut across the middle. Nobody's around him. He floats up this jump shot, banks it in through a double team to keep the game alive at the time to put the team down 1. If he doesn't make that shot, we're not talking about the scenario down the road that sets NJCU up with a chance to even make that play. So at the end of the day, I just want to put it like this. Listen, I'm the one calling the game. I can only do so much, but the credit has to go to the player at some point. And that's I'm not down on people for saying, oh, it's crazy, but publicity, media, and so on, everyone's covering everyone else except the kid that made the shot. People should be talking to Jason Battle. He made a once-in-a-lifetime shot and a once-in-a-lifetime play, and you'll never do what he did again twice.
Yeah. Also, I don't understand why Rowan didn't use a timeout when they still had 2 left after the first shot was made.
So I agree with that. Now, can I debunk the Twitter critics of the time?
Well, I've seen that. There was definitely enough time when you got the shot off.
I do agree the ball was tipped. There was 2 NCAA official referees, though, that if you look through the comment section deeply, of course, you have to do your own fair investigation, broke down their own analysis of it. One of them actually used a legitimate timer on a screen. So the good news is, on one of theirs, from the tip and so on, I think he ended it just slightly early, but it still would have been under the 2.8 in terms of getting the shot off. I think he could have waited a little bit longer to press it, but one of them had 2.2 seconds. So what that means generally is from the point of the tip, everything came down. He got the shot off within a 0.6 range. So in reality, the game should have ended right there. Another thing folks actually don't know is at the end of that whole clip, we actually added 0.4 seconds back onto the clock. So the game actually didn't technically end right there. Rowan had a chance to inbound, which is the other thing too, which we'll talk about in a moment, because you think, well, I don't even know the rules, to be honest with you, about advancing the basketball, because that was just very critical before the three made by NJCU about them using their last timeout. If you had a full timeout, why didn't you try to advance the basketball? But maybe I don't fully understand that rule in college basketball, or if that even exists. But needless to say, they got the inbound, couldn't even get a shot off. They couldn't even catch the inbound. And needless to say, that's how we ended up winning. But the other thing, the traveling violation. Um, if you go back and watch that very clearly, first off, there are no travels in college basketball in terms of inbounds. At least at a D3 level, there are only line violations. Now, he can't willingly move, but the referee didn't put his hand up until after he let himself establish his spot to make the inbound for the corner three. So that aspect is debunked. The getting the shot off in time off the deflection is debunked. And everyone else that wants to call, certain fouls or whatever, I just don't know what else to say. It was a once in a lifetime scenario that will never happen again. And just like how the instance I mentioned for New Rochelle, the only other closest comparison in terms of point comeback comparison of closing seconds I can think of, and I honestly don't remember which team it was against, but I think it was Oklahoma State in the NCAA tournament. I think in around a 64 had like an 11-point comeback in the last like 30 seconds of the game.
Yes.
That's about as close to that as you may ever get. And while that didn't have a crazy buzzer beater ending, the fact of the matter is this one did, and will probably sit, unfortunately, well, for my aspect, of course, it always sit number one. We'll see how it sits on Sports Center's number one for a while down the road. But I don't know if that can ever be topped, to be quite honest with you, in the sport of basketball, because that's just the transition is what makes the whole play.
Yeah, and what a shot by Jason Battle that was, the recovery, and he just kind of threw it up. I know some people were saying, why'd you call it a floater? It looked like a floater. It was the most awkward shot from 40 feet away, too.
Okay, so also I'll explain that. The first thought, it wasn't that it looked like a floater. It was just the first thing that came to mind of he floated it up. That was the first thing that came to mind. I didn't mean to call the shot a floater, but when you only have a quarter of a second to react to the shot, what else are you gonna do? I could say the name, whatever, but I'm just going in the moment. I wasn't expecting us to get the basketball. I thought he was actually about to fall out of bounds before he set his feet and shot it. And the other thing too, looking at that, of course you could tell Jason Battle is a relatively short kid on camera, but I have to emphasize too, this kid, oh God, I don't remember, he's 5'4", 5'7", something like that. But all game long, he was guarding a kid playing point guard for Rowan that was 6'4". So think about that. The kid's undersized. He's playing good basketball, really good defender, and he can score the basketball a bunch too. But in that moment, it's the fact too, you think about the size disadvantage, just for him to even have enough space to float that ball up in the air, hence floater, even though it's not a floater, to bank it in is huge. So, yeah, I understand the term of floater is wrong. We'll get that one all set and clear. But listen, it's a moment. It will live forever.
Yeah, it will. And kudos to Jason Battle, of course, and NJCU in the shot, but kudos to you on the call. And it's gone everywhere. Got on Sports Center. Scott Van Pelt, Barstool even shared it out. So one other question I have, because I was reading the chat when you were talking about it. You said someone took your chair at the end of the game?
Yes.
What?
I don't know what happened. So I think I circled it out and I sent in the OCM chat of I saw a white like hoodie. And the problem is we'll never get it on the broadcast because we can't go back and take
The score
the
box.
score
Mhm.
bottle. But somebody came running down from the left side immediately as we got up. So like my chair kind of like pushed backwards, like already, because I'm like, oh my God. But somebody I just feel because it was like still under the back of my leg, boom, yanks it from me. Somebody knocks down the chair next to me that my producer was sitting in, Christy. And I'm just sitting here like, what just happened? Like we're going around, like I'm looking, and I turn to look back. There's Christy's chair on the floor. Thankfully, we had a spare chair, so that's what I ended up taking. But it was like, where did my chair just go? Literally, the chair just disappeared. Somebody literally came behind me and took the chair. Took the chair. And I don't. I'm assuming they left with it. I mean,
Maybe.
I wouldn't be surprised, but it's like in that entire moment, everyone's so focused on rushing the court that somebody took my chair. So I don't know. It's definitely though something interesting that happened in a whole transition, but I think it's worth it.
Yeah. You
I'll
get
try
on Sports Center and someone takes your chair.
one on
Yeah.
Sports Set.
Yes, definitely. So Tim had his big moment in the sun this past week. So did New Jersey. I never thought we'd be starting Sports Speak with New Jersey City University men's basketball, but here we are. Super Bowl week, NBA trade deadline. We're starting with this.
Yeah, D3 basketball alone. Listen, it's not obviously publicized compared to D1, and to be honest with you, forget about the aspect of Sports Center. I just never thought there'd be even an opportunity of getting anything publicized to the media from a D3 aspect, just because again it's a different realm. But we have the right people there to set up. And hard workers, even though times are a little bit understaffed, at NJCU, we have a lot of people that work hard. Like look at people like Deja Espinoza, Christy Alejandro, who was my producer that day, who, I mean, they show up early to work, and we have a lot of athletes behind the scenes. That's the big thing. D3 is maybe compared to D1 or D2s, where we have a lot of athletes that come back, or not working their own games, to come work the camera upstairs or try to work stats and stuff down below. So it's a whole process, and for me, this is my first year getting fully involved in it. An athletics communications assistant within JCU, which also I guess I could say maybe that's the other downfall. This isn't official, but this is probably what I'm assuming, that unfortunately because of this, I will probably never do live stats for basketball again, for NJCU at least, because of the fact now that I'm probably gonna have to broadcast the games from this point out. So maybe I'll only get the live stat baseball, but it's the only downfall, because it's like, man, now I go back to broadcaster. It's not exactly what my job title was.
Well, it's more airtime. I mean,
No, I agree, but it's like my job title tells me I gotta do something differently. I still get to write the stories. I enjoy writing the stories and so on. But the point is, there's so much that goes behind the scenes. And I'm just so thankful for everyone that was there, and work their tails off just to even make a broadcast possible, let alone a day-to-day operations for live stats and everything. Because, for example, if we didn't have live stats working, that scoreboard you saw in the ticker below, that doesn't even work. So there's a whole process that went with it. And I'm just thankful everyone was able to do their job, and that we're able to get all this done.
Yeah, and I mean, I know what you feel with that. Like at Rutgers, I do a lot of the behind the scenes stuff with the Big Ten Plus streaming, and it's a group effort with all the technology that goes into it. And even at work, we were talking about you yesterday, Tim. So you're living legacy here. You are Himothy.
For the record,
You are Himothy.
Realized, like, I knew we brought in some people from Rutgers, to come call, wrestling matches and so on, but I never really realized until yesterday, like I never put the connection 1+1, because what happened is, before the winter season ended up starting, Alex ended up going, my boss technically, of course, the athletics communications director, Alex Falk, ended up doing practice for basketball, doing live statting and calling at Rutgers. I don't know if it was during one of your guys' like scrimmages before the season or one of your first games of the year, but the point is he ended up going there to utilize that for practice. I didn't connect that 1+1 with getting Rutgers students to come to ball games and do stuff. But now it kind of makes sense. So, needless to say, I never really realized because, for example, when you travel, it's still what? I mean, just from where you are, it's still what, a half-hour travel, right? I want to say.
Yeah, for me to get to the arena, it's about 15. The football stadium is 20, but any sort of traffic on a game day, that's
But
gonna double. So like,
Rutgers, Jersey City,
oh, Rutgers to Jersey City. Yeah, that's
half
gotta
hour.
be at least a half hour.
So it's like I just never put 1+1 because I wouldn't think that it would be the exact closest of locations to bring people in, but it has. And again, I'm thankful as well from everyone from Rutgers that has come by. And I mean, there's a whole bunch of you, needless to say, that have come and done a lot for this program. So I'm very thankful for that as well.
So let's move on. We're going to take a big jump from D3 basketball to the NBA because the trade deadline came to a close yesterday. Yesterday, the deadline day wasn't crazy necessarily. It was 3 trades that took place before deadline day. And of course, we have to start with the Brooklyn Nets and the end of their superstar era that led to just 1 playoff series victory. Would have been 2 if Kevin Durant's foot was just 1 shoe size smaller. As a Nets fan, my reaction to this, now, it's just shocking to me because 2 weeks ago, I went to a Nets Sixers game in Philly and Kyrie Irving was playing and things seemed to be going okay. A month ago, the Nets won 18 out of 20 games. Then Kevin Durant got hurt, but they were still playing well in Durant's absence, which was not the case the last 2 years when he missed significant time. And I thought, all right, at the very least, they're going to try this season. If things fall apart in the playoffs again, maybe they'll break it up in the summer. But Kyrie Irving requests this trade on Friday, and by Wednesday night at 1 a.m, they're both gone. So it's kind of crazy. Now, from what Shams Charania reported, basically when Kevin Durant requested his trade back in June, the Nets made the agreement, you stay, but if things go south at all, we will get you out of here and we will get you to a destination that you'd like. And obviously Phoenix was a destination he wanted to go to. But I think Kevin Durant at first would have been okay to stay through the season. And then Kyrie Irving, for some reason, decides to request a trade just completely suddenly. And then I'm not blaming it completely on the players because Joe Tsai has been very petty, I feel like, in a couple of aspects of this. The Nets did not take the best package back for Kyrie Irving. I think they got a good package. Dinwiddie back in Brooklyn can be interesting, and Dorian Finney-Smith is a decent player, and they got some picks. The Lakers would have given them more. They would have given them more options. They could have potentially bought out Russell Westbrook, which would have given them some more space if they acquired him back in the trade. Plus, they would have gotten Lonnie Walker, who's had a great year, potentially Austin Reeves, and the same amount of picks you would have gotten from Dallas. And based on current trends, the fact that the Lakers have an older roster, Dallas has Luka in his prime, there's a better chance that those picks from the Lakers would end up being better than Dallas picks down the line. So the fact that Joe Tsai, it appears, made a trade and sent Kyrie Irving away and just wanted to get him anywhere but the Lakers so he wouldn't be necessarily happy. That doesn't sit right with me. And also the fact Kevin Durant gets this massive tribute video on Twitter. TJ Warren gets a big shout out. Kyrie Irving has not gotten a single thank you from Brooklyn. And I'm not defending Kyrie Irving at all because he's what tore this apart, but it's a two-way street and you can send blame both ways. In the end, looking back at this Nets reign, of course, this is the most disappointing big three of all time. I don't like these people trying to compare it to 2013 when they brought in Kevin Garnett and Paul Pierce because those guys were essentially washed. Paul Pierce played like 2 more good years after that. Garnett was 17 years into the league, and they already had an old team with Darren Williams and Joe Johnson in their mid-30s. You had Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, and James Harden all in their primes on the roster at the same time, and the best you could do is make the second round of the playoffs. That is inexcusable, and at this point, I am aware this is going to be a rough stretch for Brooklyn because Kyrie Irving is going to be saying stuff about the Nets to the media. Kevin Durant may as well, And right now, the Nets are going to become an outpost that nobody wants to go to because they're going to think it's completely dysfunctional. And then the Nets are stuck with the albatross contract of Ben Simmons, a bunch of wing players. For some reason, they still didn't try to get a backup center at the trade deadline. And Claxton's hurt right now. So they're playing Day'Ron Sharpe, and they have no other bigs on the entire roster. They'd have to call someone up from the G League to be the backup center at this point. So there are a lot of flaws. And the weird thing is the Nets are still in fourth place. They're in a better position than they were last year. So they are still firmly in playoff positioning, but it doesn't sit well with me. The one thing I will say, at least now there's no more expectations with the Nets. And last night is a perfect example. We are kind of back to how it was before Kyrie and KD came. It's like 2019 again. Spencer Dinwiddie, Joe Harris leading the Nets to a win. They both had 20 plus points, and the Nets float under the radar and beat a decent Chicago Bulls team. So we're kind of back to that. Cam Thomas, I'm hoping he can emerge into something. I hope he finally gets playing time consistently because for some reason, neither Nash nor Jacques Vaughn have given it to him over the last 2 years. But looking at this era as a whole, you can't say anything other than a complete disappointment and frustration for the Nets. It was one of the best constructed rosters 2 years ago, and they were only able to get to the second round. And it's frustrating because you look back, and if KD's foot was behind the line, I think they would have won that championship just with the way the other teams were constructed. They would have beaten the Hawks in a series, and they would have definitely gone toe-to-toe with the Phoenix Suns in the finals. So it's disappointing. I'm just glad, like I said on the show last year when Harden left, if they're going to leave anyway, at least you got something back. But the fact that Joe Tsai deliberately didn't want to send Kyrie Irving to the Lakers just so he could not send Kyrie to his preferred destination, I got a problem with that. So, Rahill, I know you are not a Nets fan, so just from an outsider view, how do you view these moves? First for the Nets, then we'll look in the grand scheme for Phoenix and Dallas.
Okay. I am very happy it all came apart because I'm a Knicks fan. So this was pure. This was like Christmas. This is Christmas, seeing it all come apart. But in reality, it's the biggest disappointment in team sports in history. You think about how many things had to go wrong for us to get here. It starts the first year in Brooklyn. All right, KD comes. Yeah, he's rehabbing from the Achilles. Kyrie misses most of the season. He only plays 20 games because of the shoulder injury. Then all the COVID happens, and they actually played well in the bubble. Let's be honest, Eddie, we remember the Raptors at the time, I think, were the 2 seed, and they took them to a decent series. It was a pretty good series with Brooklyn. You're thinking, okay, you get Kyrie, KD back in the lineup here. The Nets are going places. Then they decide to go in, trade their young pieces, LeVert, Allen. You get James Harden. Okay, fine. Now they only play 16 games together, but in the 16 games they played together, they looked unbelievable. They were 13-3. But it all came apart after Kyrie Irving decided not to get the vaccine. That was the beginning of the end because then James Harden quit on the team. They traded him. They got bounced. They played horrible against Boston. They got bounced. KD requested a trade in the offseason. And then here we are now. And let's be completely honest, even if KD rode out the rest of this season, they probably would have traded him in the offseason anyway. It was going to happen. He did not want to be there once Kyrie get out. He didn't want to be a Brooklyn Net in the first place. Remember, KD wanted to come to New York, but Kyrie convinced him, let's go to Brooklyn. They got 2 max slots there. We can go play there. So KD was just looking at any way to get out of this situation. Tried to get out in the offseason. Didn't work. Once they traded Kyrie, he said, get me out. And so in whole, you just look at this and think, how in the world did this team only win 1 playoff series? And I understand, Eddie, if the foot was on the line, yes, but the story of this big 3 is just what ifs. What if they played consistently together? What if Kyrie got the vaccine? What if that happens? There was just so many different things that went wrong for this Brooklyn Nets team, and it completely unfolded. They looked absolutely horrible. Then firing Kenny Atkinson, getting Steve Nash, then giving Steve Nash the boot 1 year later. It was just terrible. It was absolutely horrible for the Brooklyn Nets. And now they're stuck. They're really, yes, they have some good young pieces, Cam Thomas, and yeah, they flipped Jay Crowder to Milwaukee for 5 second-round picks. So you've got stuff, but they are worse off than they were before Brooklyn. Before the Stars came there, they had nice pieces, and they played together, and they got an 8 seed in the playoffs. And now they're sort of just stuck. Yeah, they're in the 4th seed. They're probably going to dip. They might actually probably still make the playoffs. Maybe they'll finish 6th or they'll get in the play-ins, but it's going to be a rough stretch for Brooklyn. And you just look, almost everything had to go wrong for this to happen, and everything did go wrong.
Yeah, and I agree on that 100%. FCC Tim had a little bit of work to do, and we couldn't get him out of the Zoom, but so it's okay. But in the meantime, I understand how frustrating this is. I do have some optimism with the Nets. I think Cam Thomas is a piece. I think Claxton is going to be good. I think he's playing out of position. I think he should be a power forward and not a center. But there's promise. The problem is, and this is what really tore it apart, trading for James Harden. I said this on my show at Rutgers 2 years ago. The roster that they had when you combine Kyrie and KD before the Harden trade, you had Dinwiddie, you had Joe Harris, LeVert, Jared Allen, Claxton. That team was great. That was the best combination of pieces that they had because you had the 2 stars and you still had all the young pieces, with the exception of D'Angelo Russell, from the team that went on a decent playoff run before they brought in the stars. So the move for James Harden was a big, big mistake. And again, this is where I put the blame on the players, because Kyrie Irving, Kevin Durant, they will say stuff about the front office. Well, who pressured the front office into trying to bring in a third star? Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant. As much as they want to pin the blame on Sean Marks, and as much as Sean Marks has made some poor decisions, Sean Marks has tried to do the best with what he has. And he's tried his best. But the involvement of the front office now, when the players are leaving, like, you don't have to get Kevin Durant to his preferred destination. He's leaving the team. You don't have to cater to the superstar who's not going to be in your locker room the next day. And at the same time, you need to be making moves that make your team better, not to help your ego. Just sending Kyrie Irving to what he thought was an outpost because he wants to go to the Lakers. Kyrie's probably going to be on the Lakers next year, just so you can feel like, hey, we didn't let him go to his best place and instead take a lesser package. Just makes no sense to me. But Rahill, let's look at the Western Conference landscape now. The Suns are stacked. You've got Kevin Durant there with Booker and Chris Paul and Ayton. Dallas, I still got questions about Dallas. They still have a lot of holes. I don't know how Kyrie Irving and Luka Doncic is going to work. And frankly, I think this is just going to be a couple of month deal with Kyrie with the Mavs, like when Manny Machado got traded to the Dodgers. Outside of that, Warriors, I still think they can put something together in the playoffs. Steph's got to stay healthy, though. Memphis and Denver have been there enough that I feel like they're going to start to win big playoff games, but they didn't do all that much at the deadline. Denver actually subtracted Bones Highland and sent him to the Clippers. Clippers, to me, are flawed. Lakers are going to get into at least the play-in now, but I think that's about all they're going to do. So with these moves that we saw, Lakers shedding Russell Westbrook, who knows where he's going to go at this point. How do you see the Western Conference landscape sort of changing after the deadline?
Well, it should be Phoenix. If Phoenix does not win the West, it would be very, very shocking. And it might, to me, the only way Phoenix doesn't win the West is if, this is a big if, or this is very likely if they don't stay healthy. I mean, you talk about the reason they're 4 games over 500 now is Booker's been in and out of the lineup with a hamstring injury. He got nicked in the playoffs as well last year. So there's a very high chance that happens again, and they might go into a playoff series not 100%. But even still, with Kevin Durant, I know Chris Paul is on his last legs and is not what he used to be, but he can still be that organizer, that floor general, what the Nets didn't have. If you look at what KD and Kyrie had in the postseason, it was a bunch of you go, I go. It was so disorganized, so individualized play. Chris Paul brings that ball movement and that floor general mentality, and Kevin Durant can play without the basketball in his hands. We all know that. He can get 20, 25 points, 30 points on 15 shots. So it still should be Phoenix. I would even still, without Bones Highland, I'd throw in Denver. I think if Jamal Murray continues to improve his play, gets back to not maybe bubble Jamal Murray, but, to normal Jamal Murray with the way Jokic is playing at that MVP level, then you can have a series there. Memphis, once they get Steven Adams back, yes, we all like to make fun of Memphis because, they like to talk and they've been really bad in the last couple of weeks. But yes, but if Steven Adams, once Steven Adams comes back, gives them that help in rebounding, gives them back their physicality, I think they'll also be there. But Phoenix really should be the winners of the Western Conference. And then we can talk about maybe if they get to the NBA Finals versus the Celtics, who have probably been, or maybe in the Bucks, but I'd say right now Boston, because they've been the best team really in basketball since the first day of the season.
Now, quick side note, correcting something. As of 10 minutes ago, the Nets actually posted their thank you to Kyrie Irving. It's not a video. It's just a picture of Kyrie that says, thank you, Kyrie. And then 2 minutes later, they posted a picture of everybody who got traded, including Kessler Edwards, Kyrie, Kevin Durant again, and just had a thank you. So no video for Kyrie. Durant got like a 2-minute video. Irving just gets a nice little graphic made. So that's going to be the end on the Kyrie and KD talk. Let's look at the rest of the Eastern Conference. Now, there are a lot of stars. Now you have Durant and Irving leaving the East. There's rumors that James Harden in the offseason wants to go back to Houston. The East just doesn't have that many stars right now. And I think it's an open book, per se, if something happens to Boston. And it kind of did. Jaylen Brown just got hurt the other night. He's going to miss some time. And the Celtics are probably the most complete team. And again, just like how the 49ers in football, doesn't matter who their quarterback is, they win. Doesn't matter who the head coach is of the Celtics. They win games. Milwaukee, of course, we know what they can do. The Bucks are fantastic with Giannis. But Rahill, your Knicks picked up Josh Hart, and they're having a pretty good season. And with the way the East is kind of open, and you got Cleveland in the mix and Philly, how do you see the East shaking up? Boston didn't really do much. They brought in Mike Muscala. Milwaukee gets Jay Crowder, who they've been obsessed with for some reason for like 6 months. But to me right now, it's still Celtics, Bucks, Sixers. Knicks and Cavs maybe are the 2 wild cards. Nets can still make the playoffs, but how do you see it?
Well, I think overall, if Boston is injured, I think the next team after that is Milwaukee. I think Milwaukee plays the best defense of those 3 teams. They've been there. They've done it before with championship aspirations. And remember, last year, they took Boston all the way to 7 games, and they didn't even have Chris Middleton. And Chris Middleton is coming back. He's looking really good. The Bucks have now won 9 straight. So you have to like their chances if everyone is healthy and they're playing their solid defense. Now, as far as the Knicks go, Eddie, I don't really see them doing much. I'm not a huge believer in this Knicks team. I mean, yes, they're playing great basketball. Julius Randle's an all-star. Jalen Brunson probably got snubbed with an all-star appearance. But to me, Josh Hart, yeah, he's versatile, offers defense. Doesn't really do much for me because Tibbs likes to play all the starters 46 minutes. That's all he does. He doesn't use his bench. He never used Cam Reddish. So trading away Cam Reddish, I understand it, but I was absolutely angry and pissed off that the Knicks never actually used him. So Cleveland, to me, would be the most likely wildcard team just because they have more star power. You've got Donovan Mitchell. You've got Darius Garland. You've got Jared Allen, who's not a star, but Donovan Mitchell, Darius Garland, those 2 guys are playing really well. Donovan Mitchell was looking like an MVP candidate before he had got nicked up a little bit. He's getting back into the flow of things. But Darius Garland has really picked things up. So I think Cleveland right now is probably if there was a team that would shake up the East, it would be Cleveland, maybe even Miami, if Miami can find their stroke. But the way Kyle Lowry looks and them not making any deals at the deadline and Jimmy Butler being in and out of the lineup, I don't know. Maybe if they can pull it together with Spoelstra, but I'd say Cleveland would be the most likely team to shake things up in the East.
Yeah, I don't really know what's up with that. Miami probably should have made a deal and they didn't.
It was shocking that they didn't.
Yeah, and they've been shopping Kyle Lowry, and clearly nobody was really interested in him. Last question on the NBA front. So the Lakers make this move. They add D'Angelo Russell. I think we can agree this makes them a better team. They made some good moves. It's not going to push them over the edge. If anything, they get through the play-in, and they'll lose in 5 to like a powerhouse in the West. But this helped them a lot. Looking at Russell Westbrook now, where do you think he goes? Because I assume he's not going to play a game with Utah. He had a decent year when he moved to the 6th man role. Do you think there's a team? A lot of people have been talking about Paul George wanting to bring him into the Clippers. Do you think he's going to find a role on an NBA roster before the end of this season?
I think so. I don't know where that is or when that is, but I do think he's going to find a role just because, like you said, like the Lakers had 1,000 problems. And yes, he was one of them. But he was not the problem this year. He was one of the problems, but certainly nowhere near as bad as he was last year. Now, yes, Westbrook still has his flaws. He turns the basketball over and is not very efficient, doesn't shoot the 3 well, and, his athleticism is waning. But he wasn't terrible this year when switching him to the 6th man. So a team is probably going to pick him up. The question is where? I don't know. People have been talking Clippers. I don't think so. I really don't. Maybe, he'll have an extra chip on his shoulder because the Lakers pretty much dumped him. And it was a whole disaster. So maybe that's an option, but he's going to get a play somewhere just because of the way he's a former league MVP and how well he has played throughout his NBA career. I just don't know where or if it will be with a contending team. OKC, does he want to go back to Oklahoma City for the last like 1 or 2 years of his career? I mean, I don't know. I don't think OKC would have any interest in bringing him back, but hey, how about
they got the money to afford it. I will say, last point, last time the Thunder brought in a veteran piece around a bunch of young players, they made the playoffs. That's when they had Chris Paul in the 1 year, and they actually had a pretty good team that season and lost to the Rockets in the first round in the bubble. But we'll finish up with that. We're halfway through. For the Spotify listeners, tune in for part 2. On YouTube, we'll continue here. Tim Moore will be back. We'll talk about LeBron breaking the scoring record and preview Super Bowl 57. Well, continuing here on Sports Speak, episode 124, I'm Eddie Kalegi.
And I'm Tim Moore.
Rahill Jaiswal joining us as well. We're halfway through. For the Spotify listeners, if you missed part 1, we talked about Tim Moore being a viral internet micro celebrity now, and we also talked about the NBA trade deadline, so you can check that out. But it is also Super Bowl week. We got to touch on that. But let's start. I want to stay with basketball for one more segment. LeBron James has broken the NBA all-time scoring record. He did it in the third quarter on Wednesday. Now, hilariously, it was still a game the Lakers lost to the Oklahoma City Thunder. It was also Russell Westbrook and Patrick Beverley's last games with the Los Angeles Lakers. So, I want to talk about the accomplishment first. Now, what amazes me with LeBron and why he is definitely up there in the GOAT debate with Michael Jordan is because what he is doing right now at 38 years old, no other basketball player has done that. He, at year 20 in the NBA, is scoring 33 points a game, consistently out there, and is still one of the top 5 to 10 players in the NBA. No basketball player has ever done this. And the other thing, too, I know people say, at least for the all-time scoring mark, oh, he got a head start because he came into the NBA 4 years early because he didn't go to college. Well, there is such a difference between NBA basketball and high school and college ball in terms of the endurance, the strength, the carrying over from year to year that you need to do, that the fact that he's kept this up, usually when you talk about wear and tear on a player in the NBA, unlike any other sport, you don't talk about years, you talk about minutes. And LeBron has played thousands of minutes over 20 years playing in the NBA at the toughest basketball competition possible, and he's still thriving. That's the one thing that impresses me about this. The second thing, we knew it was inevitable that he was going to pass Kareem. Him breaking this record on a Wednesday night, to me, it doesn't really make a difference whether you feel about LeBron or Jordan about who the GOAT is, because LeBron was going to set the record anyway. What amazes me is that he did this before the All-Star break. A lot of people were saying, oh, he'll hit this in early April at some point. He's going to miss some games, and he has missed some games, but when he plays, he's averaging 30 plus, and he was able to hit this in the first week of February. So that is sensational to me. However, I still put LeBron number 2. I still have Michael Jordan number 1. I still think what Jordan was able to do starting in college and then immediately to the NBA, the contributions he made. And let's not forget, I know he had his retirement. He went and played baseball. He won NBA championships 6 consecutive full seasons that he played. I can't think of any other athlete with the exception of Bill Russell who has done that in a major professional sport, winning 6 straight championships that, he was there for the full 82 games for. So just with that, I say I still give the edge to Jordan, but this is an incredible accomplishment for LeBron. Also, James looked good with the headband on. It turned it back to like 2015. I don't understand why he doesn't wear a headband every game, because it makes him look about 10 years younger. But that said, congrats to the king, and to some people, the GOAT. I can't put him at that level. I do put him at number 2. But what he's doing at age 38, if he can keep this going to age 40, that may change my mind, because Michael Jordan was broken down by the time he got to the Washington Wizards. So, Tim, you're back with us. I'll go to you. I know you are a Cavs fan. Now, it's not because of LeBron. You became a Cavs fan because of Shaq, but you watched LeBron play for your favorite team twice. What does this mean, this accomplishment for LeBron, and do you put him at number 1 on your GOAT list?
Well, I'm going to first make this debate before we even talk about LeBron, because I don't want to say it's quite ironic, but of course, you and I are big NASCAR fans. Jimmy Johnson won 5, 6 consecutive championships, right?
Yes.
And yet we don't consider Jimmy Johnson the greatest NASCAR driver to ever live. So if you think about that aspect, it comes around full circle. Well, yes, Jordan had dominance. He had a great run. And I'm not saying that Jordan isn't the all-time great, but the point is that I don't think that category should necessarily mean someone's the greatest basketball player to ever live. Championships, yes. Again, I get it. It lives a legacy. People in the NBA care about rings more than ever. But then when you look at other sports, and for example, look at other rings, for example, people sometimes want to diminish Tom Brady's accomplishments because of how many championships he won. But in my opinion, if you take away Tom Brady's accomplishments outside of playoff success, it still makes him the greatest of all time in terms of quarterbacks and what he's been able to do and the records he's been able to set over a lengthy career. And now getting to the point about LeBron, I feel that I will never, ever be able to forget what he was able to do the second time he came back to Cleveland. The fact that he ended up coming home, or back home, I should say, to win a championship and deliver his promise to Cleveland is something that I'll always forever be thankful for. Maybe it's not as much as thankful to the people that have lived in Cleveland and have been looking for a championship for years, but I can be thankful for that. Growing up as a kid, I talked about this the other day. LeBron James is a freak of nature. Kids growing up, of course, we talked about when Kobe passed away, about how many kids want to imitate and be Kobe Bryant. But truly speaking, I don't think anybody's had more of an impact on kids in the 90s and early 2000s of wanting to be a professional basketball player more than LeBron James. I mean, think about it. LeBron has been the icon, the face of basketball since he's come in the NBA in 2001. He's played minute after minute. He's played his heart out. And granted, the cramps, if you remember when he was in Miami, that created some controversy. And yeah, you could say he's gotten a little bit soft as his career has gone on to an extent. He's never sat back, complained, and settled for complacency. LeBron James, and today it's kind of funny because you guys talked about Kevin Durant, right? Kyrie Irving, about how it's crazy to think that team only won one playoff series. LeBron James brought this team to an NBA Finals, yet was the only good player on his team. LeBron James is the only player, truthfully. Now, granted, as time's gone on, right? We could tell that impact in basketball doesn't happen anymore, where one good player can't bring you to a title. But LeBron James played through multiple eras and played in an era where single-handedly he carried a weaker basketball team to glory season in, season out. And there's no other player that can do that. So for me, when you look at it, from the aspect of athleticism, LeBron's a better athlete than Jordan ever was. And the aspect of, in my opinion, leadership, Jordan has that upper edge, but LeBron does command respect and really, makes good players, in my opinion, look better. I don't feel like Jordan makes other players look better. Jordan made himself stand out as compared to, for example, LeBron's passing ability to help make another player really stand out. For example, I feel Kyrie Irving played a lot better with LeBron James by his side than he's done anywhere else as the main guy, or even as Kevin Durant's side piece in Brooklyn. So with that being said, championships aside, I think LeBron James, simply put, is the greatest basketball player of all time because you can't recreate LeBron James. You can't. Yeah, you can't recreate maybe the attitude that Michael Jordan had, but there's a lot of players that comparably can play like Michael Jordan, can have the athleticism like Michael Jordan, and can do a lot of things. And let's be honest, the number by LeBron, for the moment, may be unreachable because he has years left to go in his career. But at the end of the day, Jordan's numbers, even though he took time away, is very much so reachable. Kareem's record, in my opinion, is very so much reachable because of how much the game has adapted as time has gone on. So for me, it's simply put, LeBron James has to be the greatest of all time. There's just no ifs, ands, or buts about it, in my opinion. I understand what Jordan's meant for the sport, and I understand the aspect of championships. But if you eliminate that aspect of a championship and looked at the overall athlete and how much they've actually meant to the sport of basketball, I think it's simply put, LeBron is the most polarizing figure this sport has ever seen. And that's just how I view it as. He is simply put the greatest athlete, in my opinion, of all time that will ever really touch the floor in the NBA.
Well, I can agree with you on one other thing on the LeBron argument. He just broke the scoring record. I don't think anybody would tell you that the main thing you think of when you see LeBron James is him being an elite scorer. He's a dunker, he's a distributor, he can guard 1 to 5, and he still was able to break the scoring record despite all of those other accomplishments. That's what I'd say. Now, you mentioned how the game has adapted. Part of that points total, and that's what hurts the total points argument, because obviously, for Kareem's standpoint, the three-pointer didn't exist for 75% of his career. The three-pointer wasn't as much of a deal during Michael Jordan's time. And I know LeBron is not a lethal three-point shooter, but he got a lot of points from beyond long range. So in terms of your argument that, LeBron's number is going to be unattainable, what he's doing at age 38, and if he can continue that, it may become more unattainable. But with the trends that we're seeing in the sport, with the scoring numbers going up and more people shooting threes, I don't think it's as unreachable as you might think. But Rahill, I'm going to let you jump in. I'm Team Jordan. Tim's Team LeBron. Break our tie.
I'm Team Jordan. And I have all the respect in the world for LeBron James. I'm a huge LeBron fan. And one thing that I will always respect and admire about LeBron James is I don't think many people bring this up enough. This kid, or this guy, had the weight of the world put on his shoulders when he was 16 years old. He was put on the cover of Sports Illustrated at 16 years old in high school and dubbed the chosen one. And somehow he has not only lived up to the hype, but he has surpassed it. That is one of the greatest things I have ever seen. Nobody will ever come close to that. And I truly believe no player ever has endured more slander than LeBron James in his entire career. Now, just based on everything I've seen and heard in Jordan's leadership intangibles, I'm going to take Jordan. LeBron is too, but LeBron can easily, in my opinion, pass him up. Now, maybe if he gets I don't know if he'll get another championship. Maybe if he gets another championship or two, to me, that puts him over the top. If he continues at this pace till he plays till 40, that might put him over the top for me. But for me, it's going to be Jordan. And regardless of what you can say and all you want to compare the two, just respect the fact that one of the NBA's all-time records that we thought never would be broken was broken. So congratulations to him, but I'm gonna stick with Jordan.
So let's go to football now, because Super Bowl 57 is this Sunday. Now, I'm the only person with a direct rooting interest here, though Tim has a rooting interest necessarily against the city of Philadelphia. But I am rooting for the Eagles. Now, I have to chime in on something. We haven't had an episode in a couple of weeks, and there is a certain secondary member of the New York Giants named Julian Love, who, by the way, got burned by going for an interception on a 4th down and 7, who has commented about Nick Sirianni's coaching, and I got pretty fired up about this. Now, he basically said that Nick Sirianni has a super roster and anybody could coach that Eagles team on this sort of run. Now, I'm not going to say Sirianni is some elite coach because he hasn't demonstrated that yet. This is only his 2nd NFL season as a head coach. But I feel like there is a lot of hypocrisy existing right now about between some of these Eagles haters, because you can't have it both ways. There are people who are saying the Eagles are only here in the Super Bowl because they had a cupcake schedule, because they played easy teams. They played the AFC South. They played some easy teams in the NFC. And in the playoffs, they played the Giants and they played the Niners, who ran out of quarterbacks halfway through the game, when ironically, San Francisco is the team that carried the most starting caliber quarterbacks in the NFL all year. But those same people are also saying that the Eagles are some super team and it doesn't matter who the coach is, that this team will win anyway. Well, you can't have it both ways. This is not a two-way street. Either the Eagles are a super team or they have an easy schedule. Can't be both here. They belong. They have earned this opportunity. You say what you want about what happened in the NFC this year, and I'm not going to argue that the NFC is not weaker than the AFC. It certainly is. Just look at the quarterbacks that started the playoff games in both conferences. But the Philadelphia Eagles were high and away with the 49ers, the two best teams in the NFC this year. And you have to at least give some credit to Nick Sirianni, because while the coaching might not matter all that much in the NFL, it still plays a role. I'll give you two specific examples. These two people I'm on this show with right now are New York Giants fans. They got to where they were because of Brian Daboll, who was just honored last night as the NFL's Coach of the Year, much deserved. The Giants had 5 terrible years. Daboll comes in, an uncertain quarterback, no weapons for said quarterback, a running back who constantly gets hurt, and questions on their defense, and they go 11-6 and win a road playoff game. On the other end of the spectrum, the Los Angeles Chargers, 2 years in a row, in my opinion, have had a top 5 roster, if you combine the offense and the defense, in the NFL. What has it amounted to? One playoff game that they choked a 27-point lead away in and lost. And a lot of that is because of Brandon Staley. So coaching matters. I know Nick Sirianni has fallen into a good situation thanks to the Eagles drafting and some smart trades by Howie Roseman. But look at this Philadelphia roster and just remember, when you look at the Giants and you look at the Chargers, there are a lot of ways that a coach can screw up a good roster, and Sirianni didn't. So it's not like anybody can just go in there. He has done his job to get them to this point. Now, will I say that they've had an easier path to the playoffs so far to the Super Bowl? Absolutely. The Giants are a good team. They are going to be good in these next couple of years, but they were not on the same par as the Eagles. They demonstrated that 3 times this season. San Francisco, now a lot of people are saying, and a lot of players in the 49ers, that if Brock Purdy didn't get hurt, the Niners would have won that game easily. But let's debunk that myth for a second. The Eagles scored on their first drive. I know Devontae Smith's catch wasn't really a catch, but hey, Kyle Shanahan didn't challenge it. So in the history books, it's a catch. Eagles score a touchdown. Let's say Brock Purdy did not get hurt on that play when Hassan Reddick hit him. Even still, it would have been a fumble. The Eagles would have had the ball at the San Francisco 40-yard line already leading, and all they would have had to do was run the ball 3 times, and they would have been guaranteed at least a field goal, and they would have had a double-digit lead in the first quarter at home against the Niners defense, and hey, the Eagles defense is pretty good too. So don't just say that because Brock Purdy got hurt, the Eagles just got a free win. I think the Eagles were in control of that game right out of the get-go. And even if Purdy was out there, it was going to be tremendously difficult for a young quarterback like that to come back into that game. That being said, I know this is going to be a challenge for Philadelphia. They have not faced a team like Kansas City this year. Personally, as an Eagles fan, I won't be that upset if they lose, because I just saw them win a Super Bowl 5 years ago. I know how great Patrick Mahomes is. I have a lot of respect for Andy Reid. And oh, by the way, chop chop, their running back is Isaiah Pacheco. So I won't be that upset, but I think the Eagles have a chance here. And I think a lot of people are underrating the Eagles and trying to make excuses when in the end, this is one of the best teams. And we truly have the 2 best teams in the NFL, in my opinion, facing off in the Super Bowl. But Tim, I'll go to you. I know you don't see eye to eye on some of this, but what are you looking at in this Super Bowl here between the Eagles and the Chiefs?
I hope the Eagles have as bad of the Super Bowl as the Denver Broncos did in 2013.
Well, thank you.
So I hope it's a game that lives in infamy forever. Now, of course, it's not going to be that way. But in reality, it's this. First, I guess I'll start with the statement of Sirianni not being a good coach. I don't think it's the case that Sirianni had to sit back, but I will kind of defend Julian Love in this regard. Not that Sirianni's not coaching the squad, but when for the first time ever first time in about 17 years, since 2005, you bring a team that has 21 of its 22 starters from the opening season to the Super Bowl. Health has a lot to do with it. And when you have a mix of aging veterans and the fact that the Eagles clicked early this season, for Sirianni, I'm not saying that he's not coaching, but it's very easy for him to sit back and just let things ride out because he has trusted his players, because he established that early on this season. So that goes to the point. And again, I'm not defending Julian Love, but I can see where that perception comes from because of that fact. I truly think it's the opposite end that you tend to agree with, actually, is that I just truly think the NFC East had an easy schedule. And we said it from the top of the year, that the Eagles are going to be playing. I mean, there was a couple competitive teams that they had to get through, and they did. But there's, a couple teams that just really weren't, that good or didn't live up to expectations this year. And the Eagles stomped over it. And the fact of the matter is, listen, they got C.J. Gardner-Johnson for nothing. They were able to pick up free agents, and they were able to do everything to build around depth. They got A.J. Brown, of course, for a pretty cheap price, let's be honest. And at the end of the day, the Eagles have the capability of stealing the Super Bowl quite literally with all the trades they've had. And you have to give Howie Roseman credit more than anything else. But at the end of the day, when I look at the Kansas City Chiefs, it's really, it kind of feels like, well, it does, but it doesn't. Of course, nobody expected the Bengals to be in the Super Bowl last year. It was beyond the unexpected. But I feel like the Chiefs become the underdog because all year long, all we've heard about is, can Patrick Mahomes perform to this elite level when he simply put lost his best target and all he has left is Travis Kelce. Yet he's turned around, he's elevated with a multitude of receivers. Let's be honest, I know a lot of people like Juju Smith-Schuster. I don't really think he's as great as what he was when he was first with Pittsburgh. He's battled injury woes and so on. But you have him. They traded for Kadarius Toney, who, by the way, you want to talk about conflicting interests for you. What do I want to see more? The city of Philadelphia burn its city down, or do I want to see Kadarius Toney, the guy that we just traded away to go win a Super Bowl in his first season? That's what it comes down to. My other option wasn't very great either. It was either I was rooting for lockdown corner Eli Apple or Kadarius. So needless to say, I think for Kansas City, this is going to be a huge game in terms of Patrick Mahomes' legacy, in my opinion, because you can't forget either. And of course, the connections as well. I think Sirianni was a part of the Chiefs coaching staff at one point, was he not?
I think
refired
yes.
him.
Yes.
So there's conflicting. Of course, Andy Reid against his former team, that's a story of its own. You have the Kelsey Bowl, Travis and Jason going against each other. I mean, there's a lot of stories going on into this that historically speaking, make this Super Bowl very relevant. And I'll just say it like this, not that, to jump to predictions of outcomes, but I will be very, very surprised if this is not the highest, if not one of the highest scoring Super Bowls of all time. Because I just don't see, despite injuries and so on the Chiefs end, how Patrick Mahomes cannot produce yet again in a Super Bowl to a multitude of points unless he gets hurt or he has linemen get hurt. And the same thing said for Jalen Hurts. I let's be honest, the Chiefs' standpoint defensively, their weakness is their defense, but their powerhouse is their offense. The Eagles are very good all around on paper, but if the Chiefs' offense can expose their defense, I expect it to be a slugfest. And of course, too, for the record, everybody thought that the Rams and Patriots a few years back when they were powerhouse offenses would have been that in the Super Bowl, and it turned out to be, what was it, one of the lowest scoring ever in terms of yards. I think this has potential to being the greatest offensive Super Bowl we'll ever see. And I hope it goes to overtime, to be honest with you, and it has a storybook ending. Because these are two teams that, whether you like it or not, I know I'm not an Eagles fan, but this has been a storybook season for both of them. Jalen Hurts proving himself and everything else going on, that there's a huge opportunity for both sides to capitalize on what could be the biggest game ever.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's going to be very high scoring. I also think you can't underrate the run game for either team. You talk about the quarterbacks, Mahomes and Hurts. I think both of them are going to use their running games. With the Eagles, you have one of the best offensive lines in the NFL. You have a future Hall of Famer in Jason Kelce. You've got Lane Johnson, who is playing through multiple muscle tears right now, yet he looks completely fine. Mailata on the other side, and you've got three solid backs. Miles Sanders has looked great the last 4 or 5 weeks or so. Gainwell's had some big plays, and Boston Scott scored in the NFC Championship, so it's not just against the Giants. He's now scored in 3 straight games. So I look for the Eagles to try to establish their run game, and then you can use the Chiefs' kind of youthful secondary to your advantage and try to surprise them with a pass. The Chiefs on the other side, I think they're going to use the run game a little bit too. You got Isaiah Pacheco and McKinnon. We still don't know if Mahomes' ankle is 100%. You know, Hassan Reddick and that defensive front for the Eagles are going to be targeting Mahomes and trying to make that ankle difficult for him to operate with. And last time the Chiefs were in the Super Bowl too, their offensive line got destroyed. Now, I know they were missing both of their guards in that game, but still, that's got to still be weighing in the back of their mind. And they're going against an Eagles front seven that has the 4th most sacks in a season in NFL history. But let's do our picks for the Super Bowl. And I'm going to go to Rahill first. Rahill, what are your biggest storylines looking in this game? And who's coming out on top on Super Bowl 57?
Well, the biggest storyline for me is all about the battle up front. The 2 lines. Whoever wins the battle at the line of scrimmage will win this game. If the Eagles' defensive line can get to Patrick Mahomes, pressure him, make him uncomfortable, dominate the way. You saw the way Hassan Reddick took over the game against a pretty good 49ers offensive line in the first quarter of the NFC Championship game. You saw what the Buccaneers did, like you said, Eddie, to the Chiefs O-line. Obviously, the Chiefs O-line is a lot better, and I think a main reason why the Bengals could not beat the Kansas City Chiefs this year in the AFC title game was because they got no pressure on Patrick Mahomes whatsoever. So I think for the main key for the Eagles is you get pressure on Patrick Mahomes. Now, the main key for the Chiefs is, like you said, is they have to protect. I mean, it's a battle. The storyline is going to be a battle of those lines, because I think if the Chiefs are able to establish a run game, it will help so much. Now, normally the Chiefs don't run the ball much to begin with, but Isaiah Pacheco's had a very good season, and I feel like if they can get the run game going, remember, the run game is really the defense, and the run game really helped them win that Super Bowl against the 49ers. Damian Williams closed it out. I think he had around nearly 100 yards rushing. I know he had 2 touchdowns on the ground. So I think the Chiefs have to try and establish some sort of run game, and the Eagles have to pressure Mahomes, because you can't let Mahomes sit back, drop back, give you time, especially when there's a threat of the run coming.
So, what's your score prediction? Or did I?
Oh, my score prediction. I hope it doesn't happen, but I think the Eagles are just a much better, well-rounded team than the Kansas City Chiefs. So I'm going 38-34 Eagles.
All right.
If I
go ahead, Tim.
I know you like to look at trends like I do. Have you seen the Super Bowl trend of the coin toss conspiracy?
I have. Yep.
That continues this year.
I think so.
It's intriguing. There's that, and then there's the
MVP trend. Does the MVP trend continue? 9 straight. Nine straight MVPs have lost the Super Bowl.
Not since the 90s has an MVP won the Super Bowl. So Patrick Mahomes, you better watch out. Maybe it's a blessing in disguise Jalen Hurts didn't win MVP.
Maybe it is, Eddie. Maybe that means you win the Super Bowl.
That is true. But I'll save my pick for last. So Tim, what are you looking at in the Super Bowl? By the way, I did clinch the Pick'em championship for this year, so I've won it twice. Tim's won it once. Tim also won the NASCAR one. So we're technically 2-2, and the NASCAR Pick'em's going to start again next week with Drew. But Tim, what do you see in Super Bowl 57?
So, I think I already posted the OCN server as well for my prediction, because my championship hopes are on the line, since I need an exacto score to get on top. But needless to say, I have the Kansas City Chiefs in overtime winning by a final score of 41-35 over the Philadelphia Eagles. And if I want to get exact, I'm going to say it's going to be a Patrick Mahomes, let's say 25-yard touchdown to Juju Smith-Schuster, just so him and Jackson Mahomes can, film a TikTok video celebrating in the end zone.
All right. Well, now it's time for my predictions. So the Philadelphia Eagles have had a magical year all the way through. But again, I've got a little bit of a conflict here. I'm an Eagles fan, but I also go to Rutgers, and everybody at Rutgers just keeps talking about how Isaiah Pacheco is in the Super Bowl. And shout out to him. He didn't even think he was going to get drafted. He was a 7th round pick. Honestly, was losing a lot of time in the backfield as a senior last year at Rutgers. And now he's solidified himself as the number 1 back for the Chiefs. And now he's playing as a starter in the Super Bowl as a rookie. So all the credit in the world to him. I agree with both of you. This is going to be a high-scoring game. I do think that both defenses are at least capable, though. And this is Jalen Hurts' first trip to the Super Bowl, and Patrick Mahomes struggled the last time he was there. So I don't think it's going to be as high scoring as both of you said. I think it's actually going to stay kind of low scoring in the first half, and then the two quarterbacks are going to start making plays in the third quarter. But my exact prediction, it's going to be the Eagles are going to have the ball. It's going to be tied at 31. It's going to be 3rd and 12 at the Philadelphia 46 with about 15 seconds left. The Eagles are still going to have a timeout, and it's going to be a gutsy play. Jalen Hurts is going to roll out to his right. He's going to find Devontae Smith, who's going to make the catch in field goal range. They'll call the timeout, and Jake Elliott's going to drill about a 50-yarder, and that's going to seal it. Elliott, one of the 7 returning Eagles from the Super Bowl team 5 years ago, and the Birds will be back on top. We'll see what happens to the city of Philadelphia afterwards, but we'll celebrate. From Jersey, at least for me, I don't need to go to the city and celebrate. I can celebrate my friendly confines, and the Birds are going to win 34-31.
That's the thing, though. You're not part of the problem in Jersey. It's only if you're an Eagles fan. In Philadelphia, you're part of the problem.
Well,
how you want. Just don't burn. I mean, they consider Jersey, the armpit of America, essentially. But I just guess just don't go swimming.
I don't know. And the one thing I will say their cars aren't going to be there, but to whatever Eagle fan stole CJ Gardner-Johnson's car after the Giant game, why? It makes everything look worse, but it doesn't matter. The Eagles don't care who's rooting for them. All that matters is they're going to beat Patrick Mahomes in the Super Bowl. 34-31, the final on a Jake Elliott game winner. Well, next week, we've got a lot more fun planned for you here on Sports Speak. We're going to preview the Daytona 500 and look back at the Super Bowl. So stay tuned for that next week. You can always follow us on Twitter at Sports Speak Live. Appreciate Rahill Jaiswal joining us from the dorm over at Syracuse, as always. But that'll be it for this episode here, episode 124. Again, for the Spotify listeners, if you missed part 1, it's just the most recent upload beyond this, so you can find it there. But until next time, I'm Eddie Kalegi.
And I'm Tim Moore.
And this is Sports Speak. We hope you have a great rest of your weekend. Enjoy the Super Bowl.